So what is this high behind us? Where are we?
Are we going now? Or are we just moving
Well, we've been going.
I've been recording for 2 minutes and 6 seconds.
Great. Oh, good.
It's way easier to go into it like that.
That's true. Okay, cool.
Now you're gonna turn on to your like corporate like
Yeah.
here at the Harvard Innovation
hello.
Lab.
We're at the Harvard Innovation Lab.
Wow.
What is that?
Hi.
What is that?
Welcome here. The Harvard Is this right?
That's perfect.
That's
okay,
great.
You guys are really funny.
Giggling, dude. I'm
Yeah, I know. It's Friday. It's
Made me
been quite a
nervous,
week. So the Harvard Innovation Lab is a cross-campus initiative that brings together entrepreneurs and students who are studying entrepreneurship and innovators from across the campus. So across all the different schools, the college, business school, engineering, medical, everything, as a way to become the central hub of innovation and entrepreneurship on Harvard's campus.
So do you look internally to Harvard Innovation Labs for companies to invest in?
We do. Yep. So we spend a lot of time on campus in a variety of different pockets of campus, but Harvard Innovation Lab is certainly one that we collaborate with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say I'm probably over here at least once a week, probably more, and someone on our team is here probably once every 3 days. My partner Richard has been a VC in residence here. My partner Michael teaches classes here. He's been a venture in residence here. My partner Chris teaches classes all the time about product market fit. So we're here a lot. And whether it's doing workshops, whether it's meeting and advising founders, doing office hours, judging pitch competitions, whatever it might be, we're here. We are, frequent visitors of this specific building, but also various parts on campus.
Tell us about the Boston venture capital scene. We've actually done a couple stories in the past about how Boston is just growing so fast. And obviously you've got Harvard here, MIT. Why do you think Boston is kind of next up in the venture capital space?
Yeah, so Boston it's always top 3 in startup ecosystems in the world. And it kind of swaps between New York 2 and 3, depending on which quarter you're looking at. And the way that one of our friends, Pamela Allsworth, says, she says, Boston's always in the playoffs. And so it's undeniable.
They never get a ring.
Depends
Depends
on the sport.
I'm sure.
And so it's always going to be an interesting environment. And I think it's something that's different about Boston. And I'm a native New Yorker. I spent time on the Bay Area and then came back to the Boston area. A thing that's unique about Boston in particular is that people physically need to come through here for school. And so there's a natural, continuous flow of exceptional talent. Every year there's over 250,000 students who pass through Boston. Wow. And whether they stay or not, some do, some don't. And there's a lot of initiatives around how do we get more people to stay here, but they pass through here physically. And there's more STEM degrees given here on a per capita basis than anywhere else in the world. There's more research being done in a 5-mile radius over there in Cambridge, in Kendall, than anywhere else in the world. So there's sort of some fundamental pieces that make this, in our mind, perpetually an interesting ecosystem to be a part of. Our view as investors is how do we intersect this talent as it's coming through? And it's an ongoing part of our investment sourcing. And so over a third of our portfolio has come out of places like Harvard and MIT and Northeastern. And we believe that will continue. So that's one dynamic. I think it's sort of an unparalleled flow of exceptional talent. Yeah. I think the other piece is the research and the R&D. And whether it's in biotech, life sciences, healthcare, but also increasingly in the world of machine learning and AI, like there's some really interesting and exciting research going on here, but also over at MIT. And then areas like climate and energy, we're seeing a lot of interesting things, a lot of deep tech, hard tech. I know you're going over the engine later. Yeah. And so I think all of those things, are part of the core ingredients. The other thing that I think people don't always realize is that Boston has a lot of successful B2B software companies that are now multi-billion-dollar companies. So companies like Toast and HubSpot and Flywire, and in the security space like CyberReason and Rapid7 and those companies have grown up here. They've built incredible operators who have seen that startup journey, and those folks are now spinning out and starting companies. So we have our own little mini mafias here. They're not quite as famous as the PayPal mafia, but they're interesting. And so we're starting to see more and more of that come out. And so that combination of experienced operators with some of the budding, cutting edge talent and research makes for a really interesting ecosystem.
I remember back when we were doing our daily show, Venture Daily, you'd come on a lot to talk about AI regulation. We really haven't touched on that issue, I feel like, in a long, long time, or talked to you about it, I feel like,
Yeah, it's been a
on
while.
a show. And so I'm curious, has there been any new or big updates around AI regulation in the United States?
Well, I think the biggest one that was most interesting was sort of Newsom's veto of what was going on in California, and I don't know how closely you followed that, but I think that was, in my opinion, the right decision, because I think that I don't think we've landed on how to do the right sort of tracking and placing the responsibility on some of these pieces. I think we need to, but in my mind, that measure was the closest to try to do some pretty heavy regulation, and I don't think it was structured in the right way necessarily. So I was from an innovator's perspective, I was glad to see it not pass. But I do think that it did sort of, set sort of the groundwork that we'll continue the conversation on what should we be doing and how should this be regulated.
Yeah.
Was it a bill, or what does the bill talk about?
It was a bill. It was around basically placing responsibility for where sources of data come from.
Okay.
And so that's everything from like privacy and copyright, and then also sort of bias and stuff like that. So I don't know I didn't go into too much of the weeds of it, but essentially what it was trying to determine where responsibility lay in using some of those models. And I think at the end of the day, it actually would have hurt a lot of small companies in entrepreneurship than it would have, instead of being more helpful.
I see.
So you guys invest at Underscore in early stage companies. What is a company that you're working with right now, or maybe you just recently invested in, that we would be just excited to hear about? Because there's all these like startups who are doing amazing things, but we don't often get to hear about them until years after, when they've made it big or whatever. So what's like an emerging technology that a startup that you guys have invested in that you're like psyched about? And I don't know if maybe you want to share all the details because they're still maybe in stealth or whatever. But I just want to hear, like, what's the thing you're most excited about right now?
Yeah. I mean, we actually have a lot going on in our portfolio that I'm excited about. I'll choose one. Actually, we have some out of Harvard in particular, and I'll choose one that we can talk about. Is one that came out of Harvard. It's called Herald. It's in the insurance space. I know not everybody else gets jazzed about insurance. So sexy, so hot. I know. I love reading about it, talking about it, investing in it. So it's like, wow, risk management, really cool. But the reason why I get excited about it, so the company's called Herald. The two co-founders, so grew up in the insurance, but insurtech space. They were at Bay. And Matt, who's the CEO, was at HBS when we first met him, and he and his co-founder Duncan were here. And what they're building is essentially the digital infrastructure for commercial insurance. And so everything from the API infrastructure, and now increasingly they're taking on more of the workflow automation, digitization of the entire transaction. I know it doesn't sound sexy, but
I'm locked in.
I sit on the edge of your seat, guys. I mean, insurance is an absolutely massive industry that is still early on its digital transformation curve. I can see both your eyes glossing over.
No, I'm smiling so
I'm
happy.
listening.
Think of it like the plaid for insurance.
Wow.
But
Now I
right?
get
See, now you get the wow. It's always the X for X gets people more excited. But this is just an absolutely massive industry that is ripe for being digitized in a way that it hasn't. Anything that's using fax machines and PDFs is areas that we get excited about at Underscore, which maybe not everybody
We're
does.
also excited.
Yeah. Like, why? Fax machines shouldn't exist. PDFs should not be the way they are. But anyway, these guys are taking off, and it's a huge market, and they are really qualified to do it. And again, I think that, we talk a lot about AI and what are the opportunities for unlock. There's a couple that we're really excited about, but particularly in vertical software, which is where we spend a lot of our time investing. These are areas that have a ton of proprietary data. You need industry knowledge in order to be able to do them well. So you can't just, sort of the entrepreneurs, as we like to say, have a hard time cracking in and doing interesting things there. And then there's very specific workflows that you have to understand. And I think you can get a real competitive edge through understanding that if you come from that industry. So from a vertical area, this is one that we are really excited about. And so that's what I'm jazzed about.
Can you define entrepreneur What's the definition of that?
So
I'm
this
not even
was
sure I'm hearing that right. What are you saying?
What, I
You're
think,
like, what's the
I
word?
think wannabe entrepreneur.
wannabe entrepreneur.
Wannabe,
Exactly.
yeah,
Instead
yeah.
of an entrepreneur, a wantrepreneur.
A
Wannabe
wantrepreneur.
entrepreneur.
It's kind of like you.
That's
Kinda
us.
like us. I'm kidding, please.
Well, it's interesting. I don't think being a wantrepreneur is necessarily a bad thing. And it's interesting. I think particularly on campus, we see a lot of people come in and say, oh, entrepreneurship is really cool. I want to give it a go. I want to understand it, explore it, try something. And I think being on campus is a great opportunity to do that. And whether you decide it's the right fit for you and you found an idea that has legs and you really dig into it, awesome. I think that ends up being a small percentage of the people who try stuff on campus, but that's fine. I think people try it and they either realize it's not a fit for them or they didn't really find a great idea, or they like learn some soft skills and maybe some hard skills in the act of trying, and it's more educational. And the Harvard Innovation Lab actually sort of has multi-purpose missions, which is the education component of what you can learn through entrepreneurship. And then there's the fostering innovation and invention. And then there's the actual business building value creation component to it. Or that's how I think of it. I don't know if that's how they perfectly articulate it. But I think all three of those things have a ton of value and merit. What's interesting for us as investors is we want to support all of those. I think that they're all good for the ecosystem. As investors, obviously, part of our job is to weed through who's really serious about what they're doing, who has a right to an opinion in the space that they're in, who's doing something truly innovative versus something that one of the professors here at Harvard says. He has an acronym around ideas we always see. And basically, I do think people come to campus and they think about like, okay, well, what are the problems I'm having? And then you end up seeing a lot of dating apps or let me share my location with my friends apps so they can see what I'm doing and things like that. And
Another dog walking app.
Another dog walking app, things like that. And so those ideas are fine. I think if you're just building for a target audience of MBAs, you might want to think twice about like how big and exciting is that. But
nothing
you
is
still
unique
learn
as
a
a podcasting company.
No, literally.
We're really
Two white
thinking
boys
outside
with
the
a
box.
but it's about how you do it.
When we tell you
know?
off camera what we're actually doing, then you'll be actually excited.
Why don't you tell us now?
We would never say that in front of the camera.
You tell her just like we're building.
What are we building?
See how I flipped it around?
We do this thing on the show whenever I think I just throw Josiah under the bus a lot of times, or he'll throw me under the bus in front of our guests.
I would
and
never.
it just makes the guests feel more comfortable, but you're already comfortable with us, so I guess I can just stop.
Yeah,
doing
it
that.
makes them
We're
feel
like
so
old pals.
comfortable when they like see me grasping at straws at how to answer what you just threw me under the bus for.
It's
vulnerability.
Yeah, that's
I was
true.
gonna say
Authenticity is
one of the
big.
awful jokes I made yesterday, but I'm not gonna.
Yeah, don't say that. I wanted to ask.
Yes.
So it's Friday. Tuesday was the election.
Yeah.
Trump won the election, and I mean we're in Massachusetts. I don't think a single person in this entire state voted for Donald Trump.
That's
So,
actually not true, but
so I'm imagining right that the VC world is pretty like left leaning. What was the VC group chats like this week with Trump? But then also at the same time, you see like the economy seems to immediately be responding positively with the S&P 500's up. Every company seems to be up right now. And so is there maybe like a secret so that the VCs are like outwardly, this sucks, but inwardly like, oh, this is not the worst thing for the economy. Not
IPO window opening, M&A
IPO
picking back
all
up
these
again.
things, right? What is like the
vibe.
the temperature here in Boston?
Yeah, well, you picked on something. My friend Malia Russell at Business Insider wrote something sort of similar, which is like, oh, are all the VCs sort of pretending to be sad but secretly happy? I think that there's a couple things. I think that one of the things is that the economy, by all measures, has actually been doing pretty well. And M&A activity has actually picked up, and it's been higher during the Biden administration than it was during the Trump administration. But I just think people don't necessarily sort of dig into that level of the data. I think that the optimism that people are feeling has been more centered around what Fed's going to do with cutting the rates, and that's already sort of been in process. So the idea that M&A is going to pick up dramatically because of who's president right now, I'm not sure how much that will actually impact it. It's actually already been going in a positive direction for the past 12 plus months. So I think that will continue. And so I think there's optimism around that. I do think we'll see M&A activity pick up. I do think we'll hopefully see the IPO markets open up. I'm not sure that is accelerated or dramatically changed because of who was elected. I think the other thing you could say is, okay, well, is our regulations around M&A and some of the big acquisitions going to be more favorable? Maybe I don't know. I mean, Trump in his first term wasn't as favorable towards big tech and acquisition of venture capital. So we'll see. And then I think the other piece of the puzzle. What was I going to say? Yeah. Anyway, so I think that on the stock markets. I mean, I think people are also responding to certainty. Like, I think, and I think that's what people were waiting for with election day, was like, what's going to happen? And then once you have certainty, then you can go forward. And so I think part of the spike that we see coming out of it isn't just a reflection on Trump or Republican sort of economic policy. I think it's a reflection on certainty. So I think it's a mix. I do think, I think there's positive things that will be good for venture in terms of M&A opening up and things like that. I don't necessarily think that was dramatically driven by who ultimately ended up getting elected.
Gotcha. Do you think we'll see an increased deal count or deal flow?
We're seeing that so far this year. I mean, the numbers are up in terms of dollars getting deployed, and also ultimately on the deal count. So that was already starting to happen in Q2, Q3 of this year. And so I think in some ways, I think that trend will continue. I'm not sure it's going to be dramatically changed because of who was elected. I just think that things are opening up. It's an exciting time to invest. We are still seeing a flight to quality. Even starting at seed stage, but also across the other stages. And so the dollars deployed is up, but the deal count is down. Okay. And so you're seeing the best companies are getting funded, but the total number of companies getting funded across stages is down. And I think we'll see that continue. I think the bar is really high. I think people are weeding out entrepreneurs. It is hard. Just because you seem to like the word.
I do like the word.
And so I think, I think we'll continue to see a flight to quality across stages. But I think, I'm curious. I think, there's also, I think there's a lot of people who care about a lot of issues, and now maybe we'll wonder if there's sort of startup, women's health startups and things like that, or climate. Like, are people going to turn to entrepreneurship and private sector as a way to think about solving these really hard problems? And my hope is yes.
You mentioned earlier that a third of your portfolio comes either from like Northeastern, MIT, Harvard.
Yes.
Do a lot of those companies or those founders, do they stay in Boston, or do they kind of go towards one of the coasts, or one of the hubs of New York or San Francisco?
We see a blend. And for us, we're comfortable either way. We obviously love the Boston ecosystem. We're very bullish on it. We want people to stay if it's what's right for them and their business. Over half our capital is invested here in Boston. Oh, wow. Yeah. And so we're very bullish on Boston. And I think what was missing from Boston, 10 plus years ago, and part of the reason why we exist, was early stage capital. A lot of the big guys had gotten bigger and gone to the West or to New York. And so that's part of the reason why we exist, because there was a white space here. Mm-hmm. But we see some folks stay, some go to New York, some go to California, some go to Texas. We've had a couple go to Austin, actually, or other places in the world.
Who's in Austin?
There was a company called Macro that actually came out of Harvard that moved to Texas. Yep. Okay. We have a couple portfolio companies there. Lenflow's there. We have one in Dallas too. Aircon, great company. Okay. Yeah, so a couple in Texas. We just invested in a company that came out of MIT, and it's LATAM focused, and so obviously they're gonna go there, Colombia and Mexico. Mm-hmm. So we see a blend. It depends.
Do you have a pitch to founders to stay in Boston, or do you kind of let them go wherever they want to go?
I think you got to do what's right for you. But our pitch would be, I think, I spent a lot of time with Yvonne Howe, who I really like. If you guys haven't met her, she's the Secretary of Economic Development. She was former COO of PillPack, and she comes from private equity world. But she's talking a lot about like how do we get people to stay in Massachusetts. And I think the things that she would say is that, it's a very livable place. Housing and transportation are two big issues that we are working on. But it's a place that's sort of good for innovation, good for a lot of people's values. There's a lot of great talent here. We talked a little bit about sort of operator talent. I was at an event in New York a couple weeks ago, and one of the things that they said that they were thinking about from a talent perspective is there were a lot of great founders and there was a lot of good engineering, but in terms of operators who have built startups from sort of 0 to 200 million in revenue, there weren't as many in terms of sort of that like upper management, middle management operator talent. And I think that's something that actually Boston has a lot of. We try to build a lot of community around that group. So I think we have all the ingredients to stay. And so if you want to stay, you should stay. But also people have life circumstances and stuff like that. We're seeing a lot of people also build sort of hub and spoke model. So Herald, that company I mentioned, has a group here, and they have a group in New York, and they have sort of two hubs, and that's working for them.
We have a lot of founders who watch our show, and I think that they're very interested in how do they pitch well to a venture capitalist? How do they get into that room? And so I want to ask two questions. The first is, what is something that you'll see founders do in an email to underscore that like really stands out, and you're like, okay, this is something I'm interested in. I'm going to click on this and I'm going to reply. And then the second question is, what's something you hear in pitches that you're like, that kind of makes me not all that interested anymore? If there's one thing that they should avoid speaking about in a pitch.
Good questions. So from an email perspective, love that. Support each other. From an email perspective, I always appreciate when someone's done their research. And so if their email, even, I mean, I look at cold emails, I'll look at stuff, but if they've been thoughtful about like, hey, I saw that you invested in this company and therefore I thought you might be interested in what I'm building, or I saw that you talked about this or wrote about this, and therefore that's why I think it might be relevant. I think, I'd love to, I think you have a point of view on what I'm building or whatever it might be. So somebody who's done their research and comes prepared. What is the most frustrating thing is when you get these emails that are like, I'm building a consumer company and I'm raising a Series B. I'm like, well, I don't do either of those two things. So clearly you didn't even look at our website. We do pre-seed and seed B2B software. So a little bit of research goes a long way. And then obviously keeping it tight and punchy shows that you know how to communicate well and you know what messages and things matter. So just sort of the way you show up. We always say like, investing, the process is the proof. So every step of the way, every interaction that you have is a reflection on you as a founder and how you're going to build your business and how you're going to treat people and how you're going to show up. And so all of those little touch points all add up to a picture of you as a founder. And at the end of the day, we're really investing in people. Yeah. And so just being mindful of that, how you follow up from emails, how you follow up from a meeting, how you show up, are you prepared, how you communicate, all that stuff matters. So
on a practical level, like how long is too long of an email?
Like if it's more than 3 paragraphs, you might lose me.
Cool.
Bullets.
That's good to know.
Bold, numbers.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is super helpful.
Yeah.
I think all VCs have a little bit of ADD. And so helping us narrow.
One line, give her one line.
Yeah. Well, and increasingly, I think people are starting to use AI to automate through their emails and say like, hey, which one should I pay attention to? Where? Yeah. And so you got to.
Do you do that?
I don't. But I do use Superhuman. It has a lot of AI features, so I do use it for search and summary and stuff like that. Yeah. But so that's the email question. So make it relevant, show that you're prepared, show that you're being thoughtful, give me a reason to pay attention, and then make it short enough that I can pay attention with like the fast facts that matter. Yeah, nice. And then make it easy. Don't ask for, and make it easy to then do a next step in an engagement. So that's on the email side. In terms of sort of what not to do in a pitch or like the big red flags, I think there's a couple things. I think I think founders who talk about, here's my path to exit, and we could get there in 4 years. Sort of like, well, that's not the game we're on, unless you can get to a really big company in a really short amount of time. But we want somebody who's here to build an iconic, enduring, meaningful, industry-changing company. And so if you're looking for a quick exit or a quick flip, that's not that could be awesome as a founder for you. That's just not what VCs are necessarily looking for, or our strategy. The second thing that I think is a red flag is if there's zero acknowledgement of the things that will be hard or the challenges you might have. And I'm going to borrow this from Eric Paley, but I was just on a panel with him and he talked about, they did some research and like the very best founders love talking about the hardest part of their business. And I thought that was so insightful and true. And so if you say, do you have competition, how are you going to navigate the competition? Oh, there's no competition. Or like, what are, I always like to ask the question, like, what are the hypotheses that you want to prove or disprove in this next chapter? Which ones matter the most? And if it's sort of like, oh, no, we have it all figured out, we just need to execute. That can't be true. Yeah. And so I think showing that self-awareness actually commands more respect because it shows that you really understand your business. You understand what are the things that are going to inflect the business or not. And so I think, pretending that it's all perfect all the time with total bravado to me is a total turnoff versus saying like you're, demonstrating your vision, your why, your team, all those important parts of the pitch, but also sort of like, and here are the things we need to go prove and here's how we're going to go prove them. And so to me that builds credibility.
What's the hardest part of your job right now as a VC?
I always think the hardest part is time and where to spend your time. I'm an operator. I've been a founder. And when I was at Facebook on the growth team, I mean, you could just measure your progress by the minute. Like you could see your monthly active users go up and you could change the color of a button and you see a spike, or you launch in a country, you see the spike. And so for me, the lead time in venture is the hardest part. And the reason why that's hard is that as somebody who likes to optimize all the time, and you want to feel like your time is really productive, I think the lead time makes it challenging to say like, was this a good use use of my time or not, because you could always be meeting more founders. I love spending time with portfolio companies, so I tend to spend a lot of time there. And then obviously, there's firm building stuff and things like that and things like this.
I hope this is worth your time.
Well, I want to be good citizens in the ecosystem, and I like you guys. And so that's to me, that's the hardest part, is triaging and managing your time and recognizing, are you spending your time in the right places?
Do you ever miss being an operator and going and working at a startup?
I get asked that a lot. I actually don't, but it's because I feel like the operator side of me is really fulfilled by building Underscore. We're a venture firm we're in the building phase. I think of us as sort of like a Series A/B venture firm. Yeah. And people ask me like, oh, why don't you go to the big platforms and stuff like that? I like building a venture firm. The business of venture is interesting. It's hard. It's challenging. So I love investing. I love working with portfolio companies, but I also like building a firm. And do we have the right team? Do we have the right strategy? And how's the market changing? How do we need to respond? Where are we going? So
does it feel like a startup working at Underscore?
Yeah, it does.
I asked this question when we were in SF to headline, and I was asking, like, how do you build a team of people at a venture capital firm? They're all very entrepreneurial because they all mostly come from startups. They're in this world. How do you build a team when you know that a lot of them might be working on their next idea and they might be, very quick to leave to go start another startup? Like, how do you instill in that team, like, a culture that says, like, I'm going to stick around here at Underscore, and I'm not going to go start a startup
or start my own firm?
Yeah. For us, I think it's, I think it's a couple things. We do something a little bit unique, and as part of what attracted me to Underscore is we invest with a team model. So it's not, we don't do deal attribution. It's not my investment or your investment. It's our investment. And I think that is just one component of being a small, tight-knit team. We are all entrepreneurial, but we've all chosen the path of venture as sort of our, and the path of building out Underscore as the outlet for that. So I think if anybody really wanted to go do that, I think that, I'm not sure they would have chosen to come to Underscore because they knew they were part of this journey of building a great venture firm. And so I think the combination of sort of team and culture, and I think one of our values is called actively evolve, which is this idea of like proactively always getting better and learning and adjusting. And I think that is important because, like, venture as an industry is not stagnant. I mean, I've been doing it for 7 years, and I feel like I've seen 4 different markets in that time period. So I think that for us, like, the team-oriented culture, feeling like we're kind of building our own company in doing it, and I think also saying small and lean and connected is part of what our group finds satisfying. But again, that's not a fit for everybody. You have to sort of choose it.
We're coming close to the end of our time, Lily. And so what are you looking forward to in 2025 for the firm and for yourself, that if you reach this goal or you accomplish this, you'd be really excited or really proud of yourself or in the firm?
Well, I mean, I think, as you guys know, we've just closed a new fund. So we closed our third fund in Q1.
Congrats.
Thank you. And we're really excited about that. And we also did a generational transition of our leadership. And so for us, this is kind of a launch moment of sort of the next chapter of Underscore. But we have a team that's been working together for a long time. We have an exceptional team. I'm obsessed with our team. And so what's fun for me is seeing us in go mode. And I've sort of felt that throughout, I think it kicked off in 2024. We've done 10 investments out of the new fund. Our deal flow has never been higher. We feel a lot of momentum. Like, it's an exciting time to be an early stage investor. And I think Boston's got a lot of really interesting things going on, particularly in the world of applied AI, coming out of places like Harvard and MIT and Northeastern and others. So I feel like we are sort of locked and loaded in a fun way. So for me, for 2025, I'm excited to see our team just keep doing what it's doing, meeting great founders, making great investments, supporting portfolio companies as we navigate these times. So that's what's energizing me right now.
What about personally? Like, is there any personal milestone you'd like to reach in 2025?
Oh, gosh, I haven't done my goal setting yet. I always do goal setting at the end of the year.
Nice.
I have 3 kids under the age of 6, and so I don't have a lot of, like, personal hobbies. So, like, a lot of mine are, like, survival. It's funny. One of my goals has always been get more sleep, but that's been my goal since I was 15. I'm just, like, built this way. Like, I've never actually sort of achieved it. But I do think I'm getting older. still young, but I'm getting older. I'm getting closer to that.
No way.
I'm getting closer to that 40.
You're almost 30, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm 27 in my head, plus,
Our age.
yeah, exactly, plus a little bit. But anyway, but I think like I do think health matters a lot, and I'm thinking about it more. I see a lot of founders from a health perspective and a mental health perspective be paying more attention to it, because I think, we recognize it's a long journey and things have been hard. And I think that's true for me and for our team. And so I think from a personal perspective, I think I need an Oura Ring or a Whoop or something. I need to start tracking a little bit more. I need to be a little bit more mindful, because in my head I'm 27, but my body is not.
You're
so
always as old as you feel.
yeah, well, I think your body might catch up to you.
That is true.
So I think, I used to be a runner. I've said, when I turn 40, do I want to run another half marathon? So like going back to my athlete self and my health focused self is probably going to be my 2025 goals.
For your 3 children, Harvard or MIT?
I don't know. I'm just trying to get through like
UT.
kindergarten.
Okay.
I don't know what the world of education will look like by the time they go. As long as they're happy and healthy, I don't care.
Lily, we really appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for
Yeah.
doing what you guys do. It's great for the industry. It's fun.
you.
Thank you.